we had all these recipes and all these different kinds of beers that everybody else had in San Diego. And that's when we really just shifted and went to pretty much all sour.
2005, I got my first homebrew kit, and from there, kind of, led to this. Ultimately, I ran into some guys that also did home brewing, and let them try my stuff, and they're like, "Oh, it's really good. Here, try ours." I tried theirs, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's so much better than mine. Teach me how to do this." And so one thing, led to another, and I eventually they invited me over. They taught me how to brew a little bit here and there, and then as the years went on, eventually, I wanted to get into the beer industry, and here we are. We decided to open up a small brewery and see if we couldn't do things a little bit differently than everybody else, and make beers that we wanted to drink, and styles that weren't necessarily being represented in San Diego. So here we are. We come up with an idea of what we're looking for, and say, this is what we want. And it's mostly a collaborative effort. I mean, as far as actually structuring the recipes, that's Ehren's forte. He does it far better than I ever did it, and that's why we hired him. He's just the best I could find at his job. I mean, that guy is really good. I'm really happy to have him.
It's not really the same as a lot of other breweries in the sense of it's like, hey, we have an IPA recipe and let's make it, and that's what we put out. I mean, we are brewing into barrels and foeders, and then those in turn get blended into other barrels and foeders that were brewed at different times. So it's not necessarily a beer recipe that everybody decides, okay, this is what it's going to be. When it's brewed, it's just waiting until the blending happens, and then once the blend happens, what kind of fruit should we add? Should we add fruit at all? Should we hop it? What should we do to it? And how many funky notes are there? How sour is it? And it really just depends upon
the end product, because we've probably got 20 or 30 different styles of beer amongst these barrels and the foeders and in the stainless. And when the time comes to put something together, that's when the beer, the final product really gets created, like you're saying, right, with the blending process. So we'll take some of the Saison base, some of the American Wild Sour base, and we'll take some grisette base or whatever it may be. We have so many things to choose from, and we'll add all these together.
The overall blend, I would say, is the majority of Ehren, and with his science background, he can really pick and choose which bugs, which blends, which barrels will complement each other before he even puts them together. And so on that aspect, it's really him. And then once that's finished, then the collaborative effort starts. Like I said, do we hop it? Do we add more bugs? Do we add more fruit? How, that kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
I was going to school for geological sciences, with geology and earth processes, and specifically with the way that microbes interact with the environment. And I wanted to do that until I discovered beer. And part of me was like, oh, I've worked this hard for this degree so long, I should do that. Like, it'd be a shame. This is my hobby. One's my hobby, one's my career choice. And it just didn't end up that way. I've always saw myself as a scientist of some sort, and brewing is kind of a beautiful mix of science and art and a little voodoo. But yeah, so that's kind of how that came about, you know. And when it came time to find a job, a lot of jobs in the geology field or oil jobs are not in the most desirable of geographical locations, and so part of me didn't really want to move to those areas or work for an oil company or something like that. So the beer was a natural fit. I didn't want to give up my hobby, but I got to turn my hobby into my career, and so I don't really feel like I ever work a day. As far as like how I would describe the type of beers and people thinking that we only make one type of beer, I would first say that, you know, and make it very clear to them that not all of our beers are sour, and that describing a beer like the one in front of me as just being a sour beer is denying it of all the other characteristics that it has. It's got some great oak and barrel complexity. It's got a lot of Brettanomyces complexity. It's like taking a lasagna and saying it's cheese. Well, there's a lot of other stuff involved in that. So that was one thing. I think if you don't like the sour aspect of it, we can probably find you a beer that isn't just sour and that has a nice balance between the other nuances that are about wild ales. So I would say that we could probably find something for everybody here because we have across the board a wide spectrum of everything.
I mean, I think palates are changing. It wasn't terribly popular, you know, and it's becoming more and more popular, the styles that we do and stuff in the sours. More and more people are coming along and trying them. You know, a lot of people who don't necessarily like the flavor of beer, you know, experience what we make, and to them it's very, you know, different and eye-opening and more wine-like in a way, if you will. The education is it's a very difficult, daunting and long road. It's like if you look at IPAs, you know, people wanted, you know, IPAs in the day, and then they wanted big hoppy IPAs, or bitter IPAs, and then they wanted high alcohol and bitter IPAs and palate wrecking IPAs, and they figured the more it ruined my taste buds for anything that came after, the better it was, which just, you know, it's just a natural progression. And then people have, you know, they dialed it back, and you look at, you know, the IPAs that are extremely popular now, and they're more balanced. You know, they're lower in bitterness, they're higher in the dry hop and the whirlpool, so you get more balance. And with sours, you know, I mean, and sours being like just like one of the oldest styles of beer there is, but new in this rebirth of popularity of sours. You know, people wanted this enamel ripping, smack you in the face kind of sour, and it's like people are starting to, I believe, educate themselves and like, oh yeah, wait, that it doesn't have to be that sour or that bitter. Like,
you can still have a really good base beer quality to it and have a sourness to it and a fruitiness
it's
to
all
it,
about
or
balance.
hoppiness.
And if it's done correctly, you know, it's great.